I wake up at 6 a.m. sharp, a habit developed over 40 years of my engineering career. I lie there with my eyes closed for a few seconds trying to figure out where I am. The room feels foreign even after 2 years. Too small, too impersonal. They call it a guest room, even though it's my permanent home now. I get up, walk to the window. The view of the backyard of my son's house is neat, like a catalog but devoid of soul. Our old garden was different, less orderly, but it was filled with the apple trees Mabel and I had planted the year Norman was born. My name is Edward Gibbs. I am 67 years old, and for the last 2 years, I have been living in my son's house. Not by choice, but by coincidence. After Mabel died, the house we had lived in for almost 40 years began to seem too big and empty. At least that's what Norman said. He and his wife Heather insisted that I needed to be closer to family, that selling the house was a practical decision, that an elderly person shouldn't live alone. I caved. Maybe that was a mistake. I dressed quietly so as not to wake the family. Old habits are hard to break. I've always been an early bird. Mabel often joked that even in retirement, I still got up with the rooster, as if I were still in a hurry to get to the factory. In the kitchen, I pull out the coffee maker, the one I brought from our house. Heather insisted on buying a newer, more modern one, but I refused. It's one of the few things that connects me to the past. Mabel gave it to me for our 30th wedding anniversary. "So you'll always wake up with good coffee and thoughts of me," she said then. While the coffee is brewing, I pull the picture from the breast pocket of my shirt. Mabel and I in front of our house, housewarming day. Norman was only 3 years old at the time, sitting on my shoulders and laughing. We're all laughing, young, happy, with big plans. We bought that house after my first big success. I had patented an improved cooling system for steel-making furnaces that reduced energy consumption by 30%. I remember the plant manager called me into his office and said, "Gibbs, you just saved the company millions of dollars every year. You just saved yourself a lot of money." Mabel and I could have bought a bigger house in a more upscale neighborhood, but we decided to be practical. We chose a sturdy house in a good neighborhood, close to good schools. "We'd better invest the rest in Norman's future," Mabel said then, and I agreed. "Grandpa, you're up." I turn around. Standing in the kitchen doorway is my 8-year-old granddaughter, Olivia, still in her pajamas, her hair disheveled. "Good morning, sweetie." I smile. "Do you want some cocoa?" She nods and climbs into a high chair by the kitchen island. I pull out her favorite unicorn mug. "Can we have pancakes?" she asks hopefully. "Sure, just quietly so you don't wake Mom and Dad." Olivia puts her finger to her lips and giggles. These morning moments with my grandchildren are probably the only thing that makes my life here bearable. Besides Olivia, there's 6-year-old Ethan, but he usually sleeps longer. As I make pancakes, memories of making breakfast for little Norman flash through my mind. Mabel often worked night shifts at the hospital. She was a nurse in the emergency room. So in the mornings, I usually fed my son myself before school. Norman loved the same blueberry pancakes that I now make for his kids. "Grandpa, tell me a story," Olivia asks as she watches me flip a pancake. "What's the story today?" "The one about your inventions." I smile. The kids are genuinely interested in my past work, unlike their parents, who are only interested in the financial results of my inventions. "You know, when I was a young engineer, there was a big problem in the factory. Metal parts were cooled unevenly and often turned out defective." I tell her a simplified version of the story of my first patent. Olivia listens with her eyes wide open, as if it were a thrilling fairy tale. To her, it probably is. "And did you become rich?" she asks when I finish. I ponder for a moment. Technically, yes. My patents and prudent investments have yielded a fortune most people can only dream of. But Mabel and I never lived like rich people. We invested in Norman's education, in his future, in safe assets. And now I have a sum of money in my accounts that could provide for generations to come. Norman and Heather have an idea, but they don't know the exact figure. I'm in no hurry to enlighten them. "I've become wealthy," I answer diplomatically. "But real wealth, Olivia, isn't money. It's knowledge and the ability to create useful things." "And family, right?" she adds, repeating a phrase she's probably heard from her parents. "Of course," I answer. though I'm not so sure of it in my heart. I hear footsteps. Heather enters the kitchen, fully dressed and wearing flawless makeup despite the early hour. "Good morning," she says, then immediately turns her attention to her daughter. "Olivia, why aren't you dressed yet? We're leaving in 30 minutes. "But Grandpa made pancakes," Olivia starts. "We don't have time for pancakes," Heather cuts her off. "We have to go upstairs and get cleaned up and dressed." Olivia gives me a guilty look and slides out of her chair. I shrug, letting her know I'm not offended. When my granddaughter leaves, Heather turns to me. "Edward, we talked about this. We have a very busy schedule in the mornings. If you want to make special breakfast for the kids, do it on the weekends." "I'm sorry," I replied, though I didn't feel guilty. She woke up early and was hungry. Heather sighs and pours herself some coffee from my coffee maker. "Oh, by the way, Norman and I wanted to talk to you about something tonight. Nothing urgent, just family stuff." I nod, already guessing what it's about. Usually family stuff is just another expense they need my money for. When everyone's gone, Heather's taking the kids to school, Norman's off to his office, the house falls silent, and that time belongs to me alone. I go to my room, lock the door, and pull a metal box from under my bed. In it are documents for my accounts, stocks, bonds, and other assets. Sometimes I just look through them, making sure everything is in order. It's comforting. Today I pay special attention to technology stocks that I bought back in the early 2000s. They've gone up tenfold. Mabel was hesitant at the time. "Edward, are you sure? These internet companies seem so unreliable." But I believed in the future of technology, and I was right. The total amount in all accounts is $7,500,000. Sometimes I don't believe that number myself. As a boy from a working-class family, I never dreamed of such wealth. I put the documents back in the box and slide it under the bed. Then I pull out the photo album, another relic from my past life. The first picture is of my wedding to Mabel, 1981. She's in a simple white dress her mother made. I'm in the only suit I had then, a little big. We look so young, so hopeful. I'm turning the pages. Here we are, moving into our first tiny rental house. Here's me getting my engineering degree. I studied in the evenings after working at the factory. Here's pregnant Mabel, radiant with happiness. And here's Norman, newborn, then a year old, then a schoolboy. I stop at a picture taken the day he graduated from high school. Norman is a tall, handsome teenager with a wide smile. Mabel and I stand at his sides, proud of our son. He has just received a scholarship to a prestigious university, a reward for his excellent academics and Mabel and I's years of investment in his education. Extra classes, summer programs, the best textbooks, we spared no expense. "Our boy will go far," Mabel said then. And he did. He got a degree in business administration, got a job with a big company, married Heather, as ambitious as he was. They bought a house bigger than they could afford, cars more expensive than was reasonable, and gradually they began to look at Mabel and me not as parents, but as potential sponsors of their lifestyle. We didn't notice it at first, or didn't want to notice it. Mabel always found excuses for her son's behavior. "He just wants what's best for his family," she would say when Norman once again asked to borrow a large sum of money. I close the album and return it to the shelf. Enough memories for today. It's time to get down to business. My daily routine is simple. I clean the house, though Heather insists that's the job of the housekeeper who comes in. I cook dinner, although they often prefer to order takeout. And picking up the grandchildren from school, waiting for them on a park bench across the street, weather permitting. Today is sunny, so I decide to walk to the nearest supermarket. I need to buy groceries for dinner. On the way, I notice a new book on modern metallurgy in the window of a bookstore. I go in, leaf through it, and eventually buy it. Despite my age, I try to follow the novelties in my field. The saleswoman, a pretty girl in her 20s, looks at me with interest. "Are you an engineer?" she asks, punching the book. "I've been one most of my life," I answer. "My father is also an engineer. I've always admired people who can create something with their hands and their minds." I smile. It's nice when young people appreciate engineering. In a world obsessed with financial speculation and instant wealth, there is less and less respect left for those who create real things. I return home with groceries and a book. There's still plenty of time before the kids arrive. so I sit down in a chair by the window and immerse myself in reading. The book describes modern methods of machining titanium alloys, an area in which I also had a patent. It's interesting to compare how far technology has advanced since then. At 3:30, I put the book aside and walk to the school. Olivia and Ethan are among the first to run out, cheerfully greeting me. We walk home, and they talk excitedly about their day. These moments remind me of when I greeted little Norman from school. At home, the children sit down to their lessons, and I begin to prepare dinner. Tonight will be a roast, a dish that Mabel loved to make on cooler days. The process of cooking has always calmed me. There's something of engineering about it. Exact proportions, the right sequence of steps, a predictable result. Around 6 p.m., Heather returns. She barely says hello, goes straight upstairs to change. Norman arrives half an hour later, looking like a man who carries all the problems of the world on his shoulders. "Rough day?" I ask him as he enters the kitchen. "It has been," he replies, pulling a beer out of the fridge. "The office is in chaos. A key client is threatening to cancel the contract." I nod without going into details. Norman works at a marketing agency, and his stories about work usually boil down to complaints about clients, bosses, or coworkers. At dinner, Olivia and Ethan are, as always, the most talkative. Heather constantly berates them, demanding that they behave themselves. Norman is immersed in his own thoughts, only occasionally engaging in conversation. "Ethan, how is your science project going?" I ask, trying to break the tense atmosphere. "Almost finished. Grandpa helped me make a model of the solar system. It looks amazing." "Oh, really?" Heather raises an eyebrow. "I thought you were going to do something more original. The solar system is just so basic." Ethan's face flickers. I hold back from objecting to my sister-in-law. Lately, it's getting harder and harder for me to keep quiet when she or Norman are stifling the kids' enthusiasm. "His model is really special," I say calmly. "We use special LEDs to show what each planet looks like in reality, and we added information cards with interesting facts." Heather shrugs and turns the conversation to another topic. After dinner, when the kids leave to watch TV, Norman and Heather exchange glances. There it is, the very family thing Heather was talking about this morning. "Dad," Norman begins, coughing, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." I wait for it to continue, though I can already guess where it's going. "You know that Olivia and Ethan are growing up, and they need a better education," he continues. "We're thinking of moving them to Lakeview Private School. It's the best school in the area. And the most expensive, I suppose," I say. "Well, quality costs money," Heather interjects, "but it's an investment in their future. You've always said how important education is. You paid for all those extra classes for Norman." "And I'm very grateful for that, Dad," Norman adds quickly. "Without your support, I wouldn't be where I am today." I nod, waiting for them to get to the point. "Anyway," Norman takes a deep breath, "we were wondering if you could help with their tuition. It would be a great investment in your grandchildren." Here it is, another request for money disguised as concern for the kids. "What's wrong with their current school?" I ask. "As far as I can see, they're getting a good education." "It's just a regular public school," Heather says. "Lakeview is a whole different level. Smaller classes, individualized attention, better teachers." "How much does it cost?" Norman says a sum that would make most parents choke, but I remain unfazed. "It's a considerable sum," I say. "Are you sure you can't find something more reasonable?" "Dad," Norman leans toward me, "we know you have savings. You've always been frugal, and this is for your grandchildren. Don't you want them to have the best?" I look at my son, the man Mabel and I gave everything we could, who now only sees me as a source of funding for his ambitions. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "This is a big decision, and I need time." They exchange disappointed glances, but don't insist. Later, lying in bed, I think of Mabel and me at home. The spacious kitchen where we liked to gather as a family. The study where I worked on my projects. The garden where Norman played as a child. Selling that house was the first big mistake. Moving in with my son was the second. But maybe it wasn't too late to make it right. The week after the conversation about the private school passes in a strange tension. Norman and Heather avoid directly returning to the topic, but constantly insert mentions of the benefits of elite education into their conversations. Over breakfast, Heather casually talks about her coworker's daughter getting into Harvard, thanks, of course, to the excellent preparation at Lakeview. Norman in the evening shares a story about his boss who spares no expense on private school for his kids because it's an investment in the future. These transparent innuendos are starting to get on my nerves. I used to just keep my mouth shut, but now it's getting harder and harder to hold back. It's Saturday and my grandchildren and I are baking cookies, our little tradition. Olivia sprinkles flour all over the table. Ethan is too enthusiastic to stir the dough, splattering it all over the place. But I love this creative mess. It reminds me of when little Norman used to help Mabel in the kitchen. "What's going on in here?" Heather's voice comes from the doorway. She has just returned from morning yoga and is now staring in horror at the kitchen chaos. "We're making cookies," Ethan announces cheerfully, waving a wooden spoon with dough stuck to it. "I see," Heather replies dryly. "And who's going to clean up this mess?" "I'll clean it up," I say calmly. "The kids are just helping." "Edward, I appreciate you spending time with your grandchildren, but there have to be boundaries." She takes a spoon from Ethan. "We have a meeting with the realtor in 2 hours, and then the Jenkins appointment. The kids need to get cleaned up." "We have a meeting with a realtor?" I'm confused. "Not us, Norman and I do," she says, emphasizing my exception with her tone. "We're looking at options for a larger house, with 3 garages. It's amazing. They can barely keep up with their current mortgage payments, but they're already planning a move to an even more expensive house. And of course, they're hoping I'll finance it." Now I see why they were so insistent on asking me about my investments last week. "We'll finish the cookies later," I tell the kids, catching Olivia's disappointed look. After Heather and the kids leave, I'm alone in the kitchen. I slowly clean up the scattered flour, wipe up the splattered dough, and wash the dishes. My thoughts return to the day I made the decision to sell Mabel and me the house. It was 6 months after her death. I was still in a daze of grief. 40 years together, and suddenly I was alone. The house that had once seemed cozy had turned into a museum of memories. Every corner reminded me of Mabel. Her favorite chair by the window, the kitchen cabinets she had hand-painted, the garden of roses she loved so much. Norman and Heather began talking about selling the house almost immediately after the funeral. "It's too big for you alone, Dad," Norman persuaded. "So many maintenance worries, and you're all alone. We're worried about you." Heather backed him up. "What if you fall? Or you get sick at night? Who will help you? We'll have you in our care, and the kids will benefit from the companionship of Grandpa." They were making reasonable arguments, and in my condition I couldn't resist them. Besides, the thought of being closer to my grandchildren seemed comforting. But there was a moment, I remember it very clearly now, when I noticed Heather's eyes light up when the realtor quoted the estimated sale price. At the time, I chalked it up to the usual joy of a good deal. Now I realized that she was already calculating how to use my money from the sale of the house. I wipe my hands with a kitchen towel and go to my room. I take out an old file box. It contains the papers for the sale of the house. I flip through the pages of the contract, looking at the numbers. The house went for $850,000, a considerable sum. I added the proceeds to my savings and investments. Norman and Heather knew about it, of course, and apparently expected me to be more generous. I think back to the last day in our house. I went around every room saying goodbye. I stood for an especially long time in Mabel's and my bedroom. There on the wall were the marks of Norman's growth from age 3 to 18. Every year on his birthday, Mabel and I would mark how much he had grown. "Look, Mabel, our boy will soon be taller than me," I said when Norman turned 14. "He's already big now," she replied proudly. I stared at those marks for a long time that last day, remembering how Norman had changed over the years, how he went from an inquisitive, open-minded child to an ambitious young man with big plans. When exactly did his ambition turn to greed? When did his concern for his parents change to a calculating attitude of treating us as a resource? I didn't notice this transformation. The phone rings, distracting me from my thoughts. It's my sister, Eleanor, the only other close relative besides Norman and his family. "Eddie, how are you?" Her voice, as always, full of energy despite her age. Eleanor is 2 years older than me, but she always seemed younger. "The same, Ellie," I answered, trying to sound more cheerful than I really felt. You've been saying that ever since you moved in with Norman, and I don't like it. She was never shy about being blunt. You should have stayed in your house. It's too late to talk about it. It's never too late to correct a mistake, she insists. You sound unhappy, Eddie. I've known you all my life. This move was a mistake. I remain silent, unwilling to admit the obvious. Come visit me in Milwaukee, Eleanor continues. You can stay for a week, get away from it all. My neighbor Doris is recently widowed, and she's a retired engineer too. You'll have a lot to talk about. Ellie, stop trying to match me, I said, smiling. My sister's been trying to arrange my love life ever since Mabel's gone. I just want you to be happy, her voice softens. Mabel wouldn't want you living as a prisoner in her son's house. After talking to Eleanor, I sit staring out the window for a long time. She's right, and I know it. But admitting a mistake and fixing it are two different things. It's one thing to realize that moving was the wrong decision. It's another to find the strength to change it. That evening, Norman and Heather returned from their meeting with the realtor. Over dinner, they discussed the house they saw. A real gem, according to Heather. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool in the backyard, she lists, and in an upscale neighborhood near Lakeview. Sounds expensive, I remark, as I put mashed potatoes on for the kids. Real estate is the best investment you can make, Dad, Norman replies with the look of a financial expert. Especially in a neighborhood like this. Prices are only going up there. We could get you a room on the first floor, Heather adds, getting to the point. With a private bathroom. You'd be much more comfortable than here. That's it. They're already planning to move me into the new house. And of course, they're counting on me to contribute a significant amount of money. I'm quite happy with my current room, I reply calmly. But it's small, and the stairs are a little hard for you, Heather insisted. You'll have more space in your new house, and no stairs. And there's a room that could be turned into your office, Norman adds. You could do your engineering stuff in there. Engineering stuff is what he calls the work I've devoted my life to. The job that paid for his education, his first car, his wedding. Sounds like fun, I say neutrally. How much is this dream house worth? Norman names an amount that makes me inwardly whistle. It's double their current mortgage, which they're struggling to pay. And how do you plan to finance it? I ask bluntly. Norman and Heather exchange glances. There is a moment of awkward silence. Well, we were hoping you could help with the down payment, Norman finally says. Considering it's going to be your house too. An investment in our shared family real estate. So that's when the cards opened up. They're counting on me to give up a significant portion of my savings to buy them a house they can't afford. And I'd be grateful for a room on the first floor. I'll think about it, I replied, hiding my irritation. It's a big decision. Sure, Dad, Norman nodded. But we have to give the realtor an answer in the next few days. This house won't stay on the market long. After dinner, I help the kids with their homework while Norman and Heather go off to some meeting. Olivia tells me about her history project. We have to tell about an important invention of the 20th century, she explains. I want to talk about yours, Grandpa. Her words touch me to the core. Unlike her parents, Olivia is genuinely interested in my work. I just don't know which one to choose, she continues. You have several, don't you? Yes, 7 patented inventions, I answer proudly. But the most important one is the uniform cooling system for metal alloys. It's still used in many factories today. We spend an evening working on its design. I explain the principles of metallurgy at a kid-friendly level, and Olivia takes notes and draws diagrams. It reminds me of when I used to help with Norman's lessons. When the kids go to bed, I go back to my room and pull out my laptop. I open up the search engine and start looking at rentals in Chicago. Just out of curiosity, I tell myself. Just to know what the options are. But in the back of my mind, I realize that this is the first step to regaining my independence. I look at apartments in different neighborhoods, compare prices, and study landlord reviews. Some options seem quite acceptable. Small but cozy apartments in good neighborhoods. Something like this could very well be a temporary home until I decide what to do next. The next morning, Norman catches me reading the paper in the kitchen. Dad, Heather, and I were thinking, he begins without preamble. Maybe you should meet with our financial advisor. He could evaluate your investments, advise you on how to optimize them. I look at my son over my glasses. There's a look of ill-concealed greed in his eyes. My investments are fine, Norman, I answer calmly. I've been managing them for 40 years, and I've done fine so far. But times change and financial markets evolve, he insists. Jeffrey is a very experienced consultant. He has helped many people your age protect their savings. People your age, as if I'm an old man unable to understand my own finances. Norman forgets that I've spent a lifetime closely watching the market, making sound investment decisions that have led to my current state. Thank you for your concern, but I prefer to manage my own money, I reply firmly. Norman doesn't hide his disappointment. He tries to persuade me for a few more minutes, but seeing that I don't give in, he leaves with a disgruntled look. Later that day, Heather approaches me from the other side. Edward, I realize you're used to being in control, she says with ostentatious concern. But at your age, it's important to think about the future, about who's going to manage your assets if I become incapacitated or die. I finish for her. She flinches at my bluntness. I'm just saying that Norman is your only child. All of your assets will eventually pass to him. Wouldn't it be better to start that transition now gradually, so he can learn to manage your inheritance properly? Now it all makes sense. They don't just want me to pay for their new house and private school for the kids. They want control of all my assets now, without waiting for me to die. I appreciate your concern, Heather, I reply, remaining calm. But my affairs are in perfect order. I have a will, a trustee, and clear instructions for everything. Her face changes for a moment, revealing her true emotions, disappointment, and frustration. But she quickly regains her mask of caring daughter-in-law. Of course, Edward. I just wanted to help. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. Talking to Norman and Heather finally opened my eyes to their true intentions. They don't just want to use my money, they want all of it, and as soon as possible. I think back to the day I decided to sell my and Mabel's house. Norman and Heather were so persistent, so thoughtful. They set up a meeting with a realtor, helped with packing, found buyers. It was all done so quickly that I barely had time to realize what was happening. I realize now that they had planned from the beginning to get access to my money. Moving into their house was the first step in taking control of me, and the next was to be helping them manage my finances. I get out of bed and walk over to the window. The nighttime Chicago lights twinkle in the distance. Somewhere out there, in this huge city, there is a place for me. Not as a grandpa who is needed just for money, but as an independent person with a life of my own. In the morning, I make a decision. After everyone leaves, Norman and Heather to work, the kids to school, I sit down at my laptop and start methodically researching housing options. This time, I don't just look at ads. I make a concrete plan. I find a few suitable apartments for rent in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. I call the agents, arrange viewings for next week. Then I contact my bank and make sure I have full access to all my accounts without having to visit the branch in person. Finally, I call my solicitor, Martin Kinnear, the man who has handled my affairs for the last 20 years. He's one of the few people who knows the true extent of my fortune. Edward, it's good to hear from you, he said, his voice as confident as ever. What can I do for you? Martin, I need your advice on some legal matters, I said. I'd prefer to discuss them in person. When can you meet me? We arranged to meet in 2 days at his office. I know I can trust Martin. Unlike Norman and Heather, he's never tried to influence my financial decisions for his own benefit. After the call, I feel strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, I have a concrete plan of action. No longer will I passively watch my loved ones try to manipulate me for money. In the evening, while helping Olivia with a new project, I catch myself thinking that I'm going to miss my grandchildren. They're the only ones in this house who genuinely welcome my presence, but I'll be able to see them, on my terms, not as a house servant and purser. Norman returns home in a bad mood. At dinner, he barely answers questions, immersed in his own thoughts. Finally, after the kids leave to do their homework, he turns to me. Dad, we need an answer on the house by Friday. Have you thought about my request? Yes, I have, I reply. And I have decided that I will not be a part of buying this house. His face changes. He can't hide his disappointment and anger. But why? It's a good investment, and you'll be better off there. Norman, I don't think it's wise to invest in a house you can't afford, I say bluntly. If you can't afford this house without my help, then you should look for something more affordable. It's not just about money, Heather interjects. We were thinking about your comfort. It's about all of us being comfortable. I appreciate your concern, I replied, knowing it wasn't true. But I'm quite comfortable in my current circumstances. Dad, I don't understand. Norman was getting angry. You have means. You said yourself that family is the most important thing. Isn't it logical to invest in a house where your grandchildren will live? Family is important, Norman, but I'm not sure you and I have the same idea of family. The rest of the evening passes in tense silence. Norman defiantly ignores me. Heather can barely contain her irritation. I feel like I've taken the first step toward liberation, and it's both frightening and uplifting. At night, I go over my financials again. $7,500,000, a sum accumulated over decades of labor, wise investments, and frugal living. Money that was supposed to ensure a peaceful old age for Mabel and me, and then help my grandchildren with their education, not to fund Norman and Heather's exorbitant ambitions. I'm making notes on what I need to discuss with Martin. Changes to the will, setting up an education fund for grandchildren, which they will only have access to when they reach a certain age, transferring the bulk of the funds to accounts that no one but me will have access to. I close my laptop and turn off the light. In the darkness of the room, I can almost hear Mabel's voice. It's time to live for yourself, Eddie. You've let others decide for you for too long. After meeting with Martin Kinnear, I feel more confident. My attorney fully supported the financial independence and asset protection plan. We made the necessary changes to the documents, set up an education fund for my grandchildren, and transferred the bulk of the funds into new accounts. Now my savings are safe from any attempt by Norman and Heather to access them. Edward, I've been meaning to say for a long time, Martin remarked at the end of our meeting, that your moving in with your son has always bothered me. I saw the way Norman behaved after Mabel's death. His interest in your finances seemed excessive. I was too vulnerable then, I admitted. Losing Mabel had knocked me off balance. They took advantage of that. Martin nodded understandingly. The important thing is that you realize that now. It's never too late to regain control of your life. Returning home. It's strange that I still call Norman's house home. I think about the changes ahead. I've already looked at several apartments and found the right one in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. It's a small but cozy one-bedroom apartment in an old but well-maintained building. It's easily accessible to the museums and libraries I used to love to visit. The down payment is already made, and I can move in 2 weeks. I decide not to tell Norman and Heather about my plans just yet. Their recent behavior shows that they might react unpredictably. It's better to prepare everything and then confront them with the facts. At home, I'm greeted by an unusual silence. Usually at this time, the children are already back from school, and the house is filled with their voices. But today, I only hear the muffled voices of the adults in the kitchen. He's a stubborn old man, is Heather's voice, irritated and harsh. I don't understand why he's holding on to his money so tightly. It's all ours in the end anyway. Maybe we should change our approach, Norman replies. Not to push directly, but to be more subtle. We've been subtle for 2 years, Heather exclaims. And he's refused to help with the house, with the children's private school, even with a new car. I think he suspects something. Norman's voice sounds worried. He's been a little distant lately. Distant. Maybe he's just getting old, Heather suggested. He's 67 after all. My dad's starting to forget things at that age. I stop in the hallway, hesitant to enter and interrupt their conversation. Every word is like a blow. They discuss me as if I'm an incapacitated old man or a financial resource, not a living person, not a father, not their children's grandfather. Anyway, Heather continues, we need to work out the vacation issue. Summer vacation is right around the corner, and I don't want to spend another year in the city. I talked to a travel agent, Norman replies. A 2-week tour of Europe would cost about $25,000 for all of us. Including your father? No, just us and the kids. I don't think he'd want to travel, or that we'd want to drag him along, Heather added with a slight chuckle. He'd just get in the way. The constant stops, the complaining about being tired, the need to find restaurants with proper food. I've heard enough. I take a few steps back, then open and close the front door loudly, giving the illusion that I've just walked in. I'm home, I announce, entering the kitchen with a neutral expression on my face. Norman and Heather instantly change their tone and expression. They are now the epitome of hospitality and family warmth. Dad, how was your meeting? Norman asked with feigned interest. Productive, I answer briefly. Where are the kids? Olivia has a piano lesson and Ethan is at soccer, Heather explains. They'll be here for dinner. The evening passes in the usual routine. I help with dinner preparations, though Heather, as always, criticizes my way of cutting vegetables and the amount of spices. The kids return one by one, filling the house with energy and noise. They talk about their day, show me new skills on the piano and soccer tricks. At dinner, Norman and Heather act unusually friendly. Now I understand why. They're setting the stage for a conversation about vacation. So, Norman begins when the main course is finished. Heather and I have been thinking about summer vacation. The children instantly perk up. Will we go to the sea? Ethan asks hopefully. Even better, Heather smiles. We are planning a trip to Europe. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Yay, Olivia jumps up on her chair. I've always wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. I watch this scene with sadness. The kids are genuinely excited, unaware that their parents are planning to spend money they don't have on a vacation they can't afford. That sounds wonderful, I say. When do you plan to go? In July, Norman replies. For 2 weeks. He pauses, then gets to the point. Dad, we wanted to talk to you about this. A trip like this is a great educational opportunity for the kids, but it's kind of expensive. I understand, I nod, waiting for him to continue. We thought, Heather enters, that maybe you might want to participate? After all, it's an investment in your grandchildren's future. They'll get to see the world, learn about other cultures. And how much is this investment worth? I ask you directly. About $25,000, Norman answered, trying to sound as casual as if it were a small sum. But that includes everything: flights, hotels, excursions. $25,000, I said thoughtfully. That's a lot of money. Grandpa, are you coming with us too? Olivia asked, looking at me hopefully. Before I can answer, Heather intervenes. Grandpa would probably rather stay home, honey. Such long flights are tiring at his age. Her words echoed exactly what she'd said in the kitchen. I really don't like long flights, but it annoys me that Heather decides for me and presents me to the kids as a frail old man. Actually, I said, turning to Olivia, I've been to Europe a few times. Your grandmother and I went to Paris for our 30th anniversary, and I flew to London for an engineering conference. You did? Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. Tell me. Maybe later, darling, Heather interrupted. Right now we're discussing our trip. She turns to me. So what do you think, Edward? It's a great opportunity for the kids, isn't it? I look at the grandchildren's faces, full of anticipation and hope. Then I look at Norman and Heather, tense, with greed in their eyes. They're using the kids to pressure me. They know it's harder for me to say no when it comes to Olivia and Ethan's happiness. I agree that traveling broadens your horizons. I begin cautiously. But $25,000 is a lot of money for a 2-week vacation, especially considering that you've recently wanted to buy a new house and pay for private school. Those are different things, Dad, Norman objected. A vacation is a special occasion that children will remember for a lifetime. And yet, I continue, I think you could find a more economical option, like going to 1 city instead of 3, or cutting it down to 1 week. That would cut costs considerably. Norman and Heather's faces darken. They clearly expected a different answer. Edward, Heather tries to speak calmly, though I can see her clutching her napkin. You know we can't afford a trip like this without your help, and we're only talking about $25,000. For you, that's... She hesitates, but finishes, a drop in the bucket. Her last words hang in the air. She's practically admitted that she knows the size of my fortune, my millions. Heather's right, Dad, Norman says. You've always said you've saved money for the family. Isn't this a great way to use it? I look at my son, the man Mabel and I gave everything we could, who is now using our own words to manipulate me. I've saved money for the safety of my family, I answer firmly. For education, for emergencies, not for wasteful vacations. Wasteful? Norman raises his voice. We're talking about cultural experiences for your grandchildren, who are only 6 and 8 years old, I point out. They won't even remember half of what they see. A trip to the coast or a national park is enough for kids that age. I'll remember, Olivia protests. I even keep a diary. Of course you do, sweetheart, I smile at her. I just think there are more appropriate trips for your age. You just don't want to help us, Heather says sharply. First you turn us down for a house. Now you turn us down for a vacation. We took you into our family, put a roof over your head. Heather, Norman said warningly, nodding at the children. No, let them know too, she said. Grandpa lives with us, eats our food, uses our facilities, and yet he doesn't want to contribute to the family. I can feel the anger building up inside, but I hold back. I don't want to make a scene in front of the kids. I do my part, I say calmly. I help with the kids, with household chores, with groceries and utilities. Oh, how generous, Heather exclaims sarcastically. A man with millions in checking accounts helps pay for groceries. Now she's admitting that she knows about my condition. I wonder how long ago they found out the exact amount. And what else were they trying to find out behind my back? Dad, Norman tries to be reasonable. No one's questioning your contribution. We just don't understand why you're so reluctant to help financially when you have the opportunity. 'Cause it's my money, Norman, I answer bluntly. Money that I've earned through my work, through my inventions. Money that your mother and I have saved, often denying ourselves many things. What are you going to do with it? Heather asks. Take it to the grave? Heather! Norman pulls her back, but not too harshly. No, Norman, stop beating around the bush, she turns to me. Edward, you're selfishly holding on to your millions when you could be making a better life for your family. What would Mabel say if she saw you refusing to help your own son? Mentioning Mabel is the last straw. I clench my fists under the table, but keep my voice steady. Don't you dare use my wife's name in your manipulations, Heather. Mabel would be horrified to see what our son has become and how you're both trying to use me. There is silence. The children stare at us wide-eyed, clearly frightened by the tension at the table. Kids, go to your rooms, Norman finally says. The adults need to talk. Olivia and Ethan reluctantly get up from the table and leave, casting concerned glances at us. When it's just the three of us, Norman looks at me with ill-concealed anger. How can you say that in front of the kids? Accuse us of using you when we're just asking for help? You're not asking for help, Norman, I reply. You're demanding that I fund your lifestyle beyond your means. New house, private school, now luxury vacations. What's next? A yacht? A vacation home? You've always been like this. Norman shakes his head. Always controlling every dime. Even when I was a kid, you made me account for my pocket money. I taught you financial responsibility, I object. Christian, it's a shame the lesson hasn't been learned. Your financial responsibility has turned into outright stinginess, Heather interjects. You're sitting on your millions like a dragon on treasure, and you refuse to help with your grandchildren's education. I've set up an education fund for Olivia and Ethan. That's the only thing I dare reveal from my recent financial decisions. They will have access to it when they are ready for college. In 10 years, Heather exclaims. What do we do now? Live within our means, I answer, simply, like millions of other families do. Norman jumped up from his chair, his face contorted with anger. You're unbearable. We take you into our home. We put up with your senile quirks. We take care of you, and you refuse to help us when you could easily do so. I didn't ask you to take me in, I remind him. You insisted on selling my house and moving here, and now I understand why. You were hoping to get access to my money. That's not true, Norman pounded his fist on the table. We wanted you with your family, not alone in an empty house. Then why are you so insistent on trying to control my finances? I'm asking you straight out. Why do you ask for money every chance you get? Why did Heather suggest that I gradually hand over asset management to you? Norman casts a quick glance at Heather, clearly surprised that I know about this conversation. We just wanted to help, he says unconvincingly. You're not getting any younger, Dad. Managing that kind of money is a big responsibility. A responsibility I've been dealing with for 40 years, I reply, and I plan on handling it for years to come, without your help. Norman looks at me with growing fury. I can see his emotions boiling up in him. Anger, frustration, greed. Finally, he can't take it anymore. You know what? You're giving us a hard time. Get lost. The words hang in the air like the clinking of broken glass. Heather freezes with her mouth hanging open, clearly not expecting such directness from her husband. Norman, too, looks shocked by his own outburst, but doesn't back down. I look at my son, the man Mabel and I raised with love, the man we gave the best we could, and I don't recognize him. I rise slowly from the table. I feel strangely calm, as if the last of my doubts have finally been resolved. Okay, I say quietly. I'll disappear. Without waiting for an answer, I turn and leave the room. I walk up the stairs to my bedroom and close the door. I sit on my bed and stare into the void for a long time. You're giving us trouble, disappear. The words of my own son, the one I have loved all my life, words that can't be taken back. The decision that has been maturing inside me for the past weeks finally crystallizes. I will no longer live in this house where I'm only valued for my money. I will not tolerate manipulation and disrespect. No more. I pull a suitcase out from under the bed and begin methodically putting things away. Only the essentials: clothes, toiletries, a few books. I pack Mabel's pictures and other personal heirlooms especially carefully. Then I take out the metal box with the documents. I check to make sure everything is in place: account statements, stock certificates, insurance policies, patent ownership certificates, everything that proves my $7,500,000 fortune. Money that would now serve only my interests, not Norman and Heather's ambitions. There's not a sound coming from the house. Norman and Heather have probably retired to their room or gone down to the living room. The kids are hopefully asleep by now. I'd like to say goodbye to Olivia and Ethan, but I know that will only cause more conflict. It's better to leave quietly. I take out a piece of paper and a pen. I think long and hard about what to write. Finally, I decide to keep it short. Norman, I've accepted your offer to disappear. Don't worry about me. I have a place to live and a livelihood. I will communicate directly with my grandchildren when they are older. Chihuo, I reread the note, short and to the point, without the emotions raging inside of me. I fold the note and place it on the dresser where it will be easily found in the morning. Then I grab my phone and call a cab for 1 o'clock in the morning. It's only 10 p.m., but I prefer to wait until everyone is definitely asleep. I spend the remaining hours sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at the city at night. I think about the past, the years I spent with Mabel, about Norman's birth and upbringing, about my career as an engineer and inventor, about the decisions that brought me to this point. Going over in my mind the addresses of the rental apartments I've been looking at. As early as tomorrow, I could sign the lease and start a new life. A life where I will be free from manipulation and disrespect. A life on my own terms. At midnight, I go around the room one last time, checking to make sure I haven't forgotten anything important. Then I silently descend the stairs with my suitcase and a box of papers. The house is quiet, all the bedroom doors closed. At the door to Olivia's room, I pause for a moment. Part of me wants to go in, to kiss my granddaughter goodbye, to explain that I'm not abandoning her. But I know that would only complicate things. Better to leave now and find a way to keep in touch with her later, when the passions have subsided. I put on my coat in the hallway, take one last look around the house that was never truly mine, and quietly walk out the door. The night air is cool and fresh. I inhale deeply, feeling strangely light. The cab is already waiting at the curb, headlights off so as not to attract attention. "The Ritz-Carlton Hotel, please," I tell the driver, getting into the back seat. The car pulls away, taking me away from the house where I've spent the last 2 years, from the son who just told me to disappear, from a life that no longer brings nothing but disappointment and pain. I wake up in my room at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and for a moment I think I'm home. But the high ceiling and elegant furniture quickly remind me of where I am and why. It's been 3 days since the night Norman told me to disappear. 3 days of my new independent life. After breakfast in the hotel restaurant, I meet with real estate agent Laura Page, who was recommended by Martin. She's young, energetic, and, most importantly, discreet. Minus Mr. Gibbs, I've found a few options that might interest you, Laura says, spreading out the printouts in front of us. This apartment in Lincoln Park is available tomorrow. One bedroom, spacious living room, balcony overlooking the park. The building is old but well preserved, with history. I'm looking at the photos. The apartment looks cozy, with high ceilings and big windows, the kind I've always loved. It reminds me of my first apartment with Mabel when we were first married. It looks right. I nod. Can we look at it tonight? As Laura and I discuss the details, my phone starts to vibrate. It's the third time Norman has called me today. I drop the call, just like the previous ones. Not ready to talk to him right now. After my meeting with Laura, I head to Martin Kinnear's office. My lawyer's already waiting for me in his office, surrounded by stacks of papers. "How are you?" he asks, shaking my hand. "Judging by the number of calls I've gotten from your son, you're really gone." "He called you?" That surprises me. Although, on the other hand, it makes sense that Norman would try to find me through my lawyer. 4 times in the last 2 days, Martin nods. First he asked if I knew where you were. Then he started demanding information about your accounts. I didn't tell him anything, of course. Thank you. I'm grateful for Martin's professionalism. How's the process with the trust going? Everything is ready. Martin hands me a folder with documents. The educational trust for your grandchildren is in place. They will have access to the funds when they turn 18, and only for educational purposes. Neither Norman nor his wife can touch that money. I've set aside $500,000 for Olivia and Ethan's education. That should be enough for the best universities if they want to attend. Regardless of my relationship with their parents, the grandchildren shouldn't suffer. What about the rest of the assets? I ask. Everything has been transferred to new accounts as you asked, Martin replies. Your will has also been updated. If anything happens to you, the bulk of the money will go to a charity for young engineers, as you wanted. And Norman? Martin looks at me with understanding. As you instructed, Norman will receive a token amount of $1,000. Enough so that the will can't be contested on the grounds that you forgot about your son. I nod. The decision to disinherit Norman wasn't easy for me. But after that night, I realized I couldn't trust him with my legacy. The next day, I sign the lease and get the keys to my new apartment. It may be a temporary solution, but it gives me the foundation to build a new life. The move only takes a few hours. I don't have a lot of stuff. The hotel organizes the delivery of my luggage, and Laura helps with ordering the necessary furniture: bed, desk, chair, bookshelves. By evening, I'm sitting in my new chair by the window, sipping tea and watching the last rays of sunlight color the street in golden hues. For the first time in a long time, I feel at peace. The phone rings, Norman again. This time I decide to answer it. It's time to set the record straight. Yes, Norman, I say calmly. Dad, finally! His voice sounds excited. Where are you? We've been worried sick. I'm safe in my new home, I reply. And as you can see, the phone is fine. New home? I can hear the disbelief in his voice. What new house? Dad, you can't just leave without telling anyone. I left a note, Norman, and I left exactly as you suggested. You told me to disappear. I disappeared. There's a pause. I can almost see Norman trying to find the right words to make it up to me. Dad, I didn't mean it. You know that, he finally says. I was upset, not in control of my words. We're all worried about you. The kids ask where Grandpa is. The mention of grandchildren is a painful jab. I miss Olivia and Ethan, but I know Norman is using them as leverage. Tell them Grandpa's okay, I say, and that I'll call them myself when I get settled. Listen, Dad, Norman's voice becomes more insistent. What happened was just a misunderstanding. Heather and I thought about it a lot, and we realized we were wrong. Come home and we'll discuss this calmly. Norman, I appreciate the offer, but my decision is final, I replied firmly. I'm starting a new life, on my own. But, what about us? Family's supposed to be together. Family isn't just about living together, Norman. It's respect, support, acceptance. All the things I haven't felt in your house for the last 2 years. You're not being fair, Dad. There's a touch of resentment in his voice. We've always taken care of you. Have we? I can't hold back a bitter chuckle. Or have you taken care of my money? I heard your conversations with Heather. I know you were planning to gain control of my finances. Again the pause. Longer this time. When Norman speaks again, his tone changes, becoming businesslike. Okay, Let's be honest. You left with all your money. But think of your children, your grandchildren. It's not their fault that you and I had a disagreement. I'm thinking about them, Norman. That's why I set up the education trust in their name. $500,000 that they'll get when they turn 18 for their education. 500,000? His voice trails off. And the rest? What about the rest of your money? That's it. The real reason he called. Not concern for me, not concern for the kids. It's the money. The rest is my business, Norman, not yours. You're my father. Now there's open anger in his voice. I'm your only child. You can't just disinherit me. I can, I say calmly. And I did. Your behavior has shown me that you are not prepared to handle these funds responsibly. I'm going to sue, he shouts. I'll prove that you're incompetent, that you've succumbed to senile dementia. Try it, I remain calm. Any doctor will testify that I'm sane, and I think the judge will be interested to hear how you ordered your elderly father to disappear for refusing to pay for your vacation. Norman continues to yell and threaten, but I'm no longer listening. I silently press the disconnect button and block his number. Then I do the same with Heather's number. I need peace to think about my next steps. Friday morning when I return from my walk, the building concierge informs me that a woman came by asking about me. She didn't give her name, what he says, but she was very persistent. Showed me a picture and asked if you lived here. What did she look like? I ask, though I already know. Tall, slim, blonde hair, very assertive. Heather. Somehow she knew where I lived. Probably followed Martin or myself. That worries me, but it doesn't surprise me too much. $7.5 million is incentive enough to keep looking. If she comes again, tell her you don't know such a tenant. I ask the concierge and hold out a $100 bill to him. I appreciate your discretion. In the evening, I call my sister Eleanor and tell her everything that has happened. She's the only person close to me that I trust completely. I knew it would end badly, she says after hearing my story. This move was a mistake from the beginning. Norman and his wife have always been too greedy. I should have listened to you sooner, Ellie. What's done is done. She was always practical. The important thing is that you're finally free of them. How are you feeling? Strange, I confess. On the one hand, I'm happy to be independent. On the other hand, it's sad to realize that my only son sees me only as a source of money. He made his choice, Eddie. Eleanor's voice softens. You gave him everything you could. If he doesn't appreciate it, that's his problem, not yours. The next day, I decide to start looking for a permanent place to live. Renting an apartment is a good temporary solution, but I want a home of my own, a place that will be all mine, where I can create a new hearth. I meet Laura Page at a coffee shop near my apartment and explain what I'm looking for. I want a house similar to the one my wife and I lived in, I say. Not necessarily as big, but with character, with a garden if possible, in a nice quiet neighborhood. Laura takes notes, asking probing questions about my preferences and budget. When I mention the amount I'm willing to spend, her eyes widen slightly, but she remains professional. With this budget, we'll have a lot of great options, Mr. Gibbs. I'll prepare a list and get back to you in the next few days. A week later, Laura contacts me with good news. Mr. Gibbs, I found a house that might be right for you. It just came on the market and it's not publicly listed yet. It's 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, with a small garden. In the Evanston neighborhood, quiet, but easy to get to downtown. We make an appointment for the next day. When I pull up to the house, I immediately sense something familiar. It doesn't look like Mabel's in my house from the outside, but it has the same air of coziness and stability. A brick facade, a columned porch, a small manicured garden with a few old trees. Inside, the house turns out to be even better than I expected. Spacious rooms with wooden floors, large windows with sunlight pouring in, a fireplace in the living room. A real one, just like I wanted. The second floor has 3 bedrooms and a study that will be perfect for my engineering projects. What do you think? Laura asks, watching my reaction. It's perfect, I reply. How much are the owners asking? She says it's a reasonable amount for a house like this in this neighborhood. I could pay 3 times as much and still not feel the financial strain. I'll take it, I say without hesitation. Can we start the paperwork right away? Meanwhile, at Norman and Heather's house, chaos reigns. My leaving was not just an emotional shock to them, but a financial disaster. They were counting on my money to pay for their ambitious plans. What do you mean, he changed his will? Heather shouts, pacing around the living room. You said you were in control. I didn't know he'd be so determined. Norman excuses himself. He's always been soft, accommodating, especially after Mom died. And now we're losing $7 million. Heather tosses a decorative pillow across the room. $7 million. Do you have any idea what we could do with that kind of money? We can still fix this, Norman tries to reassure his wife. I talked to a lawyer. If we can prove that Dad's incompetent. How do you prove it? Heather interrupts. He's perfectly fine. Damn it, he's got us wrapped around his finger. While we thought we were in control, he planned the whole thing. Their panic and anger just proves I made the right decision. They didn't see me as a father and grandfather, but as a source of money. And now that that source has dried up, they've shown their true colors. At this time, I am finalizing the purchase of a new house. The process is going smoothly, without complications. Martin helps with the legal formalities, and in 2 weeks I become the owner of my new home. As I move in, I feel strangely relieved. It's as if I'm shedding a heavy load I've been carrying for the last 2 years. A load of expectation, of manipulation, of constant tension. In my new home, I begin to build a new life. I'm ordering furniture that reminds me of Mabel and me, but with modern elements. Setting up an office for engineering projects I've long wanted to resume. Planting a garden, dreaming of the roses that Mabel loves so much. Norman and Heather keep trying to find me, but to no avail. I changed my phone number, and my new address is known only to Martin and Eleanor. I know that sooner or later I will have to address the issue of communication with my grandchildren, but right now I need time for myself, for recovery. $7.5 million remains safely protected. Money earned through decades of labor and invention will now serve purposes I deem worthy. Educating grandchildren, supporting young engineers, maybe a charity, but not luxury homes and vacations for those who only see you as a wallet. In the quiet of my new home, I finally feel at peace, and I realize that I made the right choice in rejecting toxic relationships in favor of freedom and self-respect. It's been 3 months since I left Norman's house and started a new life. My home in Evanston is slowly taking on character and personality. Every single thing, every piece of furniture is personally chosen by me, not to conform to fashion trends as Heather did, but for comfort and functionality. Today I woke up with the first rays of the sun, as I always do, but now it doesn't displease the housemates. I can quietly go down to the kitchen, make coffee in my old coffee maker I picked up from Norman's house, and walk out to the backyard with a cup to enjoy the morning quiet. The garden is modest so far, but with character. I planted a few rose bushes, the varieties that Mabel loved. When they bloom next spring, it will be a small tribute to her memory. In the corner of the yard is a bench under an old maple tree, a perfect place to read on warm days. After breakfast, I go down to my study. It is a spacious room on the first floor overlooking the garden. Here I have set up a workspace for resuming engineering projects. A large desk, a modern computer, shelves of technical books and magazines, and most importantly, a drafting table, just like the one I had when I was active in the factory. In recent weeks, I'd returned to a project I'd abandoned after Mabel's death, an advanced cooling system for mobile devices. The idea came to me 5 years ago when I noticed how hot Norman's smartphone was getting during long conversations. I started to conceptualize a miniaturized heatsink that could efficiently dissipate heat without increasing the size of the device. Today I'm working on a 3-dimensional model on a computer. Technology has advanced a lot since I got my first patents. Back then, all design was done by hand, on paper. Now computer programs make it possible to simulate the behavior of materials with high accuracy, which greatly speeds up the design process. The phone rings. It's Martin Kinnear, my trusted lawyer and perhaps my closest friend during these difficult months. Edward, good morning. His voice sounds cheerful. How's your engineering project coming along? Slowly but surely, I replied. The simulations are showing encouraging results. I think in a month or 2 we should be able to start prototyping. Well done, Martin approves. I call to say that Norman has been in touch again. I sigh. Despite my best efforts to distance myself from my son and his wife, they haven't given up trying to find me and, more importantly, my money. What is it this time? He's changed tactics, Martin says. Now he's repentant and asks for reconciliation. He says he realized his mistakes and wants to restore the relationship. And not a word about money? I ask with a wry chuckle. Not a word directly, Martin confirms. But he did mention that he and Heather had run into unforeseen financial difficulties and were reevaluating their life priorities. I shake my head. So predictable. When direct pressure and threats didn't work, they switched to tactics of regret and remorse. What did you say to him? The same thing I told him before, that I wasn't authorized to discuss your affairs or relay messages, but he insisted that I let you know of his sincere desire to reconcile. Thank you for letting me know, I said, but my position hasn't changed. I'm not ready to communicate with Norman or Heather, at least not until I see a real change in their attitudes, rather than feigned remorse over their financial difficulties. After talking to Martin, I sit for a while, staring thoughtfully out the window. Memories of the last 2 years at Norman's house come flooding back. The constant allusions to my money, the manipulation through the grandchildren, the dismissive attitude, as if I were not a full human being, but a burden to be tolerated only for potential gain. I remember especially vividly the period when they persuaded me to sell my house to Mabel and me. How persistently they described all the advantages of moving in with them. How cleverly they played on my grief after Mabel's death. You'll feel better if you're not constantly surrounded by memories, and Heather said with fake concern in her voice. Think about the practical side, Dad, Norman echoed her. This house is too big for one person. How much effort and money goes into maintaining it? And I, stunned by grief, gave in to their entreaties. I sold the house where Mabel and I spent the best years of our lives. From the kitchen where she cooked her specialties to the garden of roses, she grew with such love. Every corner of the house held her presence. Only now do I fully realize how much of a mistake it was. Not only because I lost my independence, but also because I allowed my material connection to my past, to Mabel, to be taken away from me. And for what? To live in a guest room in the house of people who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM machine. I get up from the table with determination. I'm done wallowing in dark memories. I have a new life now, new opportunities. And unlike before, I'm in complete control now. Today I have a meeting scheduled with a group of retired engineers I met through a local club. They are people of my age and professional circle. Former engineers, designers, inventors. We meet once a week in a small cafe near my home to discuss the latest technical innovations, share experiences, and just socialize. I put on a light jacket, the day promises to be warm, and leave the house. It takes about 20 minutes to walk to the cafe, which gives me a chance to enjoy the fresh air and organize my thoughts. 4 of my new friends are already at the cafe. Robert, a former aircraft engine design engineer. Alan, an electronics specialist. Dorothy, the only woman in our group, a talented chemical engineer. And Philip, who has spent his life designing bridges and other large structures. Edward, Felipe greets me, raising his hand. Sure, we've already ordered your favorite tea. I take a seat at the table, feeling a warm wave of appreciation. These people, whom I've only known for a couple months, show more genuine attention than my own son has in years. How's your cooling system project coming along? Asks Alan, who knows more about modern electronics than anyone else. Slowly but surely, I reply. I recently finished the computer modeling of the first version. The results are encouraging, but there is still work to be done. I could help with calculating the thermal conductivity of new composite materials, Robert suggests. In aviation, we've used several promising alloys that could be suitable for your project. Sharun. And I know a great lab where you can order a prototype when you're ready, Dorothy adds. A former student of mine works there as chief engineer. I nod, genuinely grateful for their help and support. That's what a real professional community is all about. People who value your knowledge and experience over the size of your bank account. Our conversation flows smoothly from technical topics to more personal ones. Felipe talks about his grandchildren who come to visit him on weekends. Dorothy shares her impressions of a recent trip to Europe. Alan complains about the neighbors who are making a lot of noise. Listening to them, I realize how much I have missed such simple, human companionship all these years. In Norman's house, I was like an invisible person, a person whose opinion nobody cared about, whose interest nobody took into account. After the meeting, I leisurely returned home, thinking about how strangely life works. It took me losing my wife, selling my house, and being told by my own son to disappear to finally find true independence in a circle of like-minded people. I get a surprise at home, a delivery guy with a big box on the doorstep. "Minus Mr. Gibbs?" he asked, checking the delivery note. "Delivery for you from Miss Eleanor Gibbs." My sister always had a knack for the unexpected. I sign for the package, thank the courier, and take the box into the house. Inside, I find an old leather-bound photo album, a few books, and a letter from Eleanor. "Eddie, found these family heirlooms in the attic. Thought they'd be perfect for your new home. Love, Ellie." I open the album and freeze in surprise. These are pictures of Mabel and I from our youth, many of them I'd never seen before. Here we are at a picnic with friends. Here we are dancing at someone's wedding. Here Mabel is holding newborn Norman in her arms, and I'm standing next to her, so young and proud. These photos are a real treasure. They take me back to a time when our family was happy, when relationships were built on love and care, not financial calculation. I spend all evening looking at the album and reminiscing. Not all the memories are cloudless. There were hard times and disagreements, but there was sincerity. There was respect. There was an understanding that family isn't just about living together and sharing resources, but also about emotional connection and mutual support. The next morning, I am awakened by a phone call. The number is unfamiliar, but I decide to answer. "Grandpa," Olivia's voice sounds unsure. "It's me." "Olivia!" I can't contain my joy. "How are you, sweetheart?" "Sakun." "I'm fine," she answers. "I'm at school right now at recess. I borrowed a friend's cell phone to call you." "Don't you have your own phone?" I wonder. "I do, but Mom and Dad keep track of all my calls," she explains with a serious tone. "They forbid Ethan and I from calling you. They say you're sick and need to rest." That's right. Not only are Norman and Heather lying to me about their remorse, but they're turning the kids against me by making up a disease that doesn't exist. "I'm perfectly healthy, Olivia," I say softly, "and I miss you and Ethan very much." "We miss you too," I hear tears in her voice. "Why did you leave, Grandpa? Why don't you come back?" I sigh, trying to find words that an 8-year-old can understand. "Sometimes adults need to live apart from each other, even if they are family," I explain. "I have my own house now, and I'm fine there. But that doesn't mean I stopped loving you and Ethan." "Then why don't you come visit us?" she insists. "I wish I could," I answered honestly. "But first I need to work out some things with your parents. Adult issues. I promise that as soon as it's possible, we'll definitely see each other." "You promise?" There's hope in her voice. "I promise," I say firmly. "In the meantime, maybe you can call me once in a while like this?" "I'll try," she says. "Oh, the bell for class. I gotta run. Have a good day, sweetie. And say hi to Ethan." After talking to my granddaughter, I sit for a long time thinking. I don't like that Norman and Heather are using the kids in their games, lying to them about me. But I don't know how to solve this problem without opening the door to more manipulation on their part. I decide to consult with Martin. My lawyer listens to the story and shakes his head thoughtfully. "You need to formally settle the issue of communication with your grandchildren," he says. "Maybe through a visitation agreement that will formalize legally. That way they can't use the kids as leverage." "Do you think Norman would agree?" I ask skeptically. "If we approach the issue correctly, he won't have a choice," Martin says confidently. "I will draft an agreement and contact him." A week later, I receive good news from Martin. Norman has agreed to negotiate for me to see my grandchildren. We schedule a meeting at Martin's office on neutral ground. On the day of the meeting, I feel a strange excitement. I haven't seen my son in 3 months, since the night he ordered me to disappear. I don't know what to expect from this meeting, but I'm determined to hold my ground. Norman arrives without Heather, which is a good sign. He looks tired with dark circles under his eyes, and his suit, once impeccably tailored, now looks baggy. "Hello, Dad," he says, hesitating to approach for a handshake or a hug. "Hello, Norman," I reply neutrally. Martin invites us to sit down and outlines the essence of the proposed agreement. I will see my grandchildren twice a month, taking them at weekends. All contact will be direct, without the mediation of Norman or Heather. That's acceptable, Norman said slowly, studying the document. But Dad, do we really need all these formalities? We're a family. A family that forbids the children from contacting their grandfather and makes up a non-existent illness to justify it, I remark. Norman flinches but doesn't deny it. We were upset, he excuses himself. Your leaving came as a shock to us. And yes, we were angry about the money, but now we've realized our mistakes and we want to make things right. Did your financial difficulties suddenly lead to an epiphany? I ask skeptically. It's not just about money, Norman insists. Although yes, we've had to abandon a lot of plans. We're selling the house, moving into a smaller apartment. Heather got a job. And now you're thinking about family values, I finish for him. Norman is silent, his head down. Then he looks up, and I'm surprised to see tears in his eyes. I really was a terrible son, Dad, he says quietly. Heather and we fixated on money, on status, on the trappings of success. And in the pursuit of it all, we lost something important. I listen in silence, not knowing whether to believe this sudden remorse. When you left with your money, we were furious at first, Norman continues. But then, when we had to reassess our whole way of life, we began to realize how much we had lost, and not just financially. And what exactly did you realize, I ask, still wary? That we were using you, Norman admits. That we didn't see you as a father and grandfather, but as a source of money. That we manipulated you, playing on your love for your grandchildren and your guilt after Mom died. He pauses. Anna, and that we convinced you to sell the house you loved, not because we cared about you, but because we wanted to control your money. His confession sounds sincere, but I've let myself be fooled for too long to believe it right away. What do you want, Norman? I'm asking you straight out. For me to come back and finance your life again? No, he shakes his head. I know that's impossible. I've broken your trust. I just want you to be a part of our lives, so the kids don't grow up thinking their grandfather abandoned them. I stare at my son for a long moment, trying to see the truth behind his words. There's still something of that little boy in him that Mabel and I love so much, but there's also the grown man who hurt me with his betrayal. I'll sign an agreement to see my grandchildren, I finally say, but repairing our relationship will take time and proof of sincerity on your part. I understand, Norman nods, and I am ready to wait and prove. After signing the agreement, Norman leaves, and I stay with Martin to discuss the details. Do you believe in his remorse? Asks my lawyer. I don't know, I answer honestly. Time will tell. But even if he has truly changed, I will never let him or Heather manipulate me again. 2 weeks later, I see my grandchildren for the first time in a long time. Olivia and Ethan come to visit me for the weekend, and my new home is filled with children's laughter and running around. I show them the garden, my office, treat them to homemade cookies I learned to bake from Mabel's recipe. Seeing their happy faces, I realize I made the right decision. Regardless of my relationship with Norman and Heather, these children are part of my life, my joy and continuation. In the evening, when the grandchildren are already asleep in the rooms I have specially prepared for them, I go out into the garden and sit on a bench under a maple tree. The starry sky spreads out above me, and it's as if I can feel Mabel's presence close by. You see, darling, I say to her mentally, I've finally found the strength to live on my own. It's a shame I had to go through so much pain to come to this. A cool breeze caresses my face like a gentle touch. I close my eyes and smile. A new chapter has begun in my life, without toxic relationships, without manipulation, without having to constantly conform to other people's expectations. I am free, and that freedom, even if it came late, was worth every minute of the struggle.